a new password and my second name will disappear from the records. And they go to me and like, so you changed your name? Can you provide us with a proof of that? Oh, anyway, I managed in the end, but it was quite a cumbersome process. So actually one not only has positive things of us not having to provide information, but when you come from a paper-based society, actually you also have to learn and think through things. What does it mean that you're actually linking information rather than copying it? You have less influence over it in terms of how it gets represented. You need to get it right at the beginning how you want that. So you cannot just present yourself in this way to them and in that way to them, but you actually are consistent because we're talking about digital systems. And that's something also the reality that we will be facing in the future, that on the one hand side, we will actually have a much more working digital environment, but we also need to provide means for the individual to control the data exchange. So having transparency and accountability will become much more important in our future, and I'm looking forward to discussing that with you even a bit more.
Thank you very much, Robert. Then Steven, could you introduce yourself and your vision?
So my name is Steven van der Walle. I'm researching interactions between citizens and public services, and more in particular when things go wrong in that interaction, public service failures, and then behavioral reactions of citizens against government, complaining, running away, burning down government offices if things get extreme. On the side, I'm also together with Joep coordinating the Erasmus Mundus program in e-governance and public sector innovation and e-governance, which you can see quite a few of our students in the room, your future colleagues, we hope. And we felt there is a huge need for this program. I mean, the public sector organizations are kind of scrambling to get our students into their organizations for internships. So, and we'll probably approach some of you in the future as well to provide internships for our students, which also gives you the first chance of hiring them. So my vision, what I would like to focus on today is don't forget the laggards. So I live in a small town not so far from Leuven, you know, the most innovative university in Europe. My local government reads emails, but not always. When I go to the bakery, well, I have to choose, depends on whether I have cash or not, because one of them does not accept card payments. And if you're looking for a restaurant, half our restaurants are not on TripAdvisor, so you wouldn't know they existed. Some don't even have a website. And quite a lot of my daily work consists of printing PDF forms, putting stamps on them, and having them scanned and sent back to government organizations which claim to be digital. So there is a world outside the interoperability bubble.
Thank you very much. The last but not least, Gianluca.
Yes, already took some time in my presentation. Just, currently I'm working, the last 10 years, as I said, at the JRC in Seville, the Joint Research Center, that is the in-house knowledge service of the European Commission. But I had a life before, and one of them, well, several actually. One of them was in Switzerland when I was the director of an executive master in electronic governance. And in fact, I was in Lausanne this week, and I was very proud to tell my colleagues that I was going to an event organized by a master that is doing in a probably much better way. We were traveling all over the world, in the US, Canada, China, Japan, and Korea, and several locations in Europe, including Estonia, 10 years ago, so 15 years ago actually, when they were really starting, and then they are continuing this very important mission of mixing, as Professor Booker said this morning, the technology and the social science. So I encourage you, and I'm sure that this will have a lot of success in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your nice introductions and your visions. Now we start to work. So I would like to have now the first question launched. There are in total 9 questions. Most of them are closed, but some of them are open, as you will see. So the first question that we have: the future of digital transformation is not digital technology, but the humans working with the digital technology. I look forward to your responses. number is counting.
I can disagree.
Okay. So.
Somewhat disagree.
No. So Gianluca, what is your response? What you would have voted?
Well, I would actually disagree because in reality, more and more we will have the necessity to interact with technology, or the other way around. Technology will interact with us. Okay. So we better get ready for that.
So you are one of the exotic people, you would be.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Robert.
I would join the club. I mean, I would like to use a quote by Kofi Annan, which he made more in the democracy context. But I mean, for me, digital transformation is certainly about transforming how humans interact with computers, but it cannot be less than using technology. Yeah? So I mean, I think it is first and foremost about technology, and then we talk about how we interact with it. And if we don't get the technology right, then why should we have digital transformation?
Thank you. Emanuele.
Since I work for the IT department in the Commission, I would vote for the technology is not important stance, because it looks good. If an IT guy says technology is not important, it looks modern. But more seriously, if you want to support this position, and also for the sake of our discussion, I think that what is inherent truth in that first statement is that technology is about augmentation of human functions. And we need to reflect, particularly from the engineering room, if we are, again, in some cases, throwing a technology at, let's say, a problem, or whether we are starting from let's say, from the needs. And this, very briefly, requires a different mindset from the point of view of designing services. So when we are designing a service, again, we may be jumping a technology solution at a particular requirements, or we may ask more questions. And that's a completely different approach.
Excellent.
Well, I also put in disagree, but from different perspective. But from a different perspective, most citizens, they use technology, but they don't care what's under the bonnet. I can drive a car, but I have no clue how a car works. So yeah, the digital technology is very important. It will drive the changes, and you have to make it as easy as possible to make citizens start using it, because, well, they don't care that we have been talking for years about the harmonization of certain data sets. I mean, the only thing they see is whether it works or not.
Thank you very much. Who agreed? Could you raise your hands, please? Ah, so it's good. Yeah, perfect. So our slider is working. That's the best. Huub, what did you vote?
Yeah, I voted agree, although it is a difficult choice to make depending on what the perception of the question is. But if you say that digital transformation or the digital technology is, let's say, determining what technology drives the digital transformation, that would mean that we would not be at the wheel, and that would, in my perception, also mean that there's no digital technology that can fail because it's imposed on us. And maybe very naively, I like to think that we are still somehow at the wheel of choosing of what digital technology we adopt and not. Obviously, the Facebooks, the Googles, we had a choice. Now we don't have a choice anymore in those, but there must have been competitors that have failed. And so from that perspective, I say, okay, the digital technology is in fact a very big driver, but I hope that as human beings, we could still be the factor that selects the technology that we allow the digital transformation to happen.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive response. Monica.
I'm sorry. You have to work. Yeah, you caught me. I'm multitasking, sorry. I would say I would agree with the predecessor, because I still would like to believe that we can influence whatever process requires any technology. So without humans, the process might go, without our influence, might in a direction that is difficult to predict.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the next Question number 2. Public administration should focus on digitalizing basic public services instead of focusing on the latest technological developments.
Or agnosis, so it's important.
So, Steven, what's your response? And you see that the majority has agreed, but quite a significant percentage, 33% disagreed, and to my surprise, 15% don't know.
Well, I put in agree. Of course, government needs to be aware of what the latest technological developments are, set up pilot projects to know how those technologies work and be prepared for it. But a lot of the things we're struggling with is still pretty much about relatively normal databases which have to be linked to each other and standards that have to be harmonized. That's what it in the end all comes down to, still at this stage. So hopefully in the future we can move on to fancy new things, but thus far there's still a lot of talk about blockchain, artificial intelligence, other things, but you don't actually see it practiced in most governments.
Thank you. Emanuele, do you have something to add?
Yes, I voted disagree, but with a qualification. The way I interpreted the sentence, perhaps misinterpreted the sentence, was that there could be, let's say, a narrow way of purely digitalizing public services, meaning that you take an existing service, the way it's designed, with an analogic technology, and you improve it by adding on top of it or replacing the analogic technology with a digital technology. And we know that this is not a pure theoretical case. In many instances in the public administration reforms, digital public administration reforms in Europe, that was a bit the mindset, at least at the beginning. Now there's a trend that fortunately is coming to the front where we are taking the opportunity of availability of technologies to redesign the service. And by redesigning the service, this means that in some cases the whole procedures which are behind the provision of the services would need to be rethought fundamentally, and that the end result will not be just a digitalized service, but will be a new type of service that is enabled by technology. The concept of citizens' journeys, for example. The idea that you want to connect different services in ways that make sense from the point of view of the users. Again, as I said this morning, in part they are borrowed by the consumer's experience in platforms where, let's say, you are profiled in a positive sense, in this case, in such a way that you are offered things in a sequence that you may want to consider purchasing. Now, the government is not organized like this. The government is organized by department. You want taxes, you go to taxes, even if you need family allowances from another department. If no one is telling you to do that, if you just digitalize that process, you will get various single entry points, which we currently have, in fact, and no connection between the dots in a way that makes sense to citizens.
Thank you for your clear response.
Yeah. So, I mean, as my original education was management, I want to come back to a simple task here. I mean, but when I look at this question, I mean, it's a clear question of prioritization. So what's more important, that we do our homework or we go for the fancy stuff, right? So if we follow what is said about President Eisenhower, that he governed by just two principles. Is it urgent and is it important? Right? And if you take those two dimensions, you can make a very nice matrix. Yeah? So you have those tasks that are important and urgent as category A. You have those tasks that are important but not urgent as category B. You have those tasks that are urgent but not important as category Z. And then you have those tasks that are neither important nor urgent as category D. Yeah? So a task that is neither important nor urgent, you just delete. Yeah, that's why it's category D. The task that is urgent but not important, you delegate. Yeah, that's category C. Then the task that's urgent and important, okay, you need to address that. That might be the new technology, right? So it's fancy, it gives you the adrenaline. That's why category A. But the one that really qualifies you and brings you forward is category B. That's the one that you never get to, that you have to do on the weekends, that you have to do during the breaks when you finally have some time. So Christmas is coming, so academics finally get to write papers, right? So that's the important work. And so for me, that would be digitizing the basic services that we all can have a better digital life. So in the end, it's just prioritization.
Thank you very much.
Well, it looks like, as usual, I'm the rebel because
Yes.
I strongly disagree because and not only because we manage the AI watch and we just published a report on blockchain and it's very cool, etc. But for two reasons. One is because the risk and actually, unfortunately, the reality that we have seen in the last 20 years is that in many cases, by digitizing or digitalizing the services, we are just mirroring online what we are doing offline, and this is creating a lot of troubles to make really the change that we want to achieve. So by focusing, of course, correctly on emerging technologies that have a transformational power, if done right, we can really make the digital transformation we are aiming at. And as an example, and this was already in the past considered the example of the bank system. So this week, again, I was in Switzerland. I was in Geneva with some friends that work in big banks, and they're saying, well, in a couple of years, we will have only robots. And they are doing it. And blockchain, yes, we are using it. So this is happening already, and this will happen. So I think we should look at this not just because there is an AI declaration on it, and blockchain is also cool, but we should really understand how the public sector can innovate by using this technology. And then, of course, I agree also that we need to make sure that then there is a continuity in the business and we don't have a crash, whatever system we use.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. The gentleman, would you like to respond to Gianluca's statement?
I agree. I mean, for me, again, you cannot just only reform because you also need to do a little bit of homework because otherwise you can't do the services. So I agree.
Okay.
I would comment in the way we are, let's say, or portraying the way we are also opportunistically trying to use the most fancy and advanced technologies in the context of our transformation strategy. And I think that we are looking for windows of opportunities where there is a demand for a transformation, adding just, let's say, I would call it a normal technology that would be improving on the side of automation and existing process is not enough because you need to add an element of smartness in the project. And this is where I see the crossing of the different elements that would make sense, where it would make sense to explore, let's say, a particular technology. And now I'm talking in particular about, let's say, AI-powered processes. But you may have a similar justification, decision tree, if you want, very opportunistic, very pragmatic and low level, also for distributed ledger technology. So it makes sense to the extent that the use case and the business requirements are such that they cannot be addressed in an easy way and rapid way by, let's say, the existing set of technologies just by doing things a bit better.
Yeah, I also tend to disagree a bit with Gianluca. I mean, those disruptions, we always predict they'll come very fast, but they always tend to come very, very slow. Most of our governments, we're now on the eve of a digital transformation, but most of our governments largely still work as they did in the 19th century, based on the Weberian model. I mean, look at the European Commission, it's still pretty much a French organization as it existed also in the 1950s in France. So the basics are still relatively the same. The technology has changed a little bit, but fundamentally it's not all that different. So I don't see banks disappearing in the next 20, 30, 40 years. I don't see governments disappearing in the next 50 to 100 years.
Thank you very much. What did you respond?
Actually, it's not very easy to answer to the question, but yes, I agree that first of all, the public administrations should digitalize the basic services, but in the same time, the public administration must have also a technological view. So the PA must be focused also on the next technology.
Thank you. Do you agree?
Actually, I disagree, and we are colleagues, so we have an issue here. And I answer disagree in the sense that I dream a public administration that leverage the new technology for better serving the citizen needs that can be different than the ones served by the basic public services. So again, someone has already told it, we should think differently for the citizen and think about different services, and the technology can help us with that.
Thank you very much. Someone else to add to what the gentleman said, or would like to add, or if not, oh there, I see Colin. I will run to you, Colin.
Yeah, I also chose disagree, but it is a difficult question and maybe even a trick question, because the latest technological developments do not mean that you cannot use them in digitalization of basic public services. If you read the question and think, okay, we start at the beginning, that's good, because there's work to be done. But if you don't take into consideration what is now available and what could be used to digitalize these basic public services, then you're also doing it wrong. Because if you start now by transferring PDFs in the online form, right? If you do that now, then it's also not very useful. But you need to take a look, like, what can these technologies and the latest ones, and totally agree, like there's a lot of hype. Sometimes it doesn't need to be done, but they can enable certain things now. And if that means that the basic public services can be reinvented extremely well, why not, right? Why does it has to be new? It has to be working for the service.
Thank you very much. I see the lady in the back.
Yes, I answered, I don't know, because I think it depends very much on the level of maturity of the government. So, and that's why I think that a country that is really low, has a very low level of maturity, should first, well, have a low profile as well, and take advantage of countries who have better maturity to then come in the train at a later stage when they increase a bit their level of maturity.
Thank you very much. I see a lot of hands, but I think let's go to the next question, because we have 9, and I would like to finish also at 3 o'clock. But thank you very much for your response. The question number 3. The layer of the European interoperability framework that needs the most attention in the future is technical, semantic, organizational, legal, or, last but not least, integrated public service governance. I am very interested in this question. Yeah. Oh, quite interesting, but we have still the half, of the course. The vote was last time was 59 people voted, so. So, Natalia, how you would respond to this?
I didn't have the right answer because I wanted to have them all. No, I think there was a lot of focus on the technical and semantic till today. It doesn't mean we don't have to continue with those ones, but it is true that the awareness raising and the work to be done on the legal and organizational, which are quite close, it becomes more evident, and I think what we have been discussing these 3 days has proven it. So, well, what I see here is that there is still some work to be done in the coming weeks, years, so that's very good.
Thank you. Gentlemen, someone of you who would like to respond to this remarkable, interesting result?
So I voted organizational and very much in line with the comment Emanuele made in response to the previous question. It's not just about automating things, but it's about first reforming services before automating them, because automating redundant organizations is easy. And the example often given is our famous Belgian Crossroads Bank. It's a great example of data exchange, but nobody dared to take the hard decisions and abolish some of those organizations which are part of the data exchange. That was a political decision, it was an organizational decision. So ideally, we first take care of organizational reform and then we automate. But politically, that's generally not feasible, so we have to build some workarounds. We're building an interoperability framework which is based on loads of workarounds. And legally, it will of course also be difficult to have the European Union take the lead in that, because, well, there is legally you can help organizations to cooperate in terms of administration, but you cannot force any national governments to reform their administrations.
No, I mean, I think clearly the most important is the European interoperability framework. I think first and foremost about the whole thing, I mean, there is a need why we actually have a framework that all of those factors are important for this implementation. Why legal is doing so well in this category is, of course, because we always look for guidance in the legal area, and if we don't get them, then we're always like, what should we do? But if we would first regulate without really knowing how the rest would work, then we might actually limit our technological possibilities. So it's always a hen and the egg problem there. What I think is really the big challenge in the operability area is really the semantics in the end, because that's where we learn how does Europe really work. Because that's where the nitty-gritty detail is in there. And, if you take that times 26 or to the power of 26, then, you know very easily how that can explode. If we don't have Europe and we have to do everything bilaterally of those semantic mappings, that's where the real challenge is in there. And so to do that work here well, and to also find, not only to document and to structure, and then to start implement, but actually also to simplify. If we really manage to streamline those efforts, that's why I think, for me personally, the semantics is the most important.
Interesting. Gianluca?
Yes, well, as I said, I had other lives before the Commission. So in one of them, when I was working for the United Nations, I remember I was invited once to a workshop in Bangkok, where UNDP was presenting the EIF framework. And I say, well, but I think this is, we have in Europe. So I went to study, and actually they had the E was not capital, so electronic interoperability framework. But then in reality they were, with the correct references, making reference to the previous version of the EIF, the IWC, etc. So I think there's and one of the issue came out. What should come first? The legal, the technical, and I think the integrated public service. The governance is then, the layer that I think remains the most important, and that was 20 years ago, and I think is still now the one to be addressed with, I would say, a sense of urgency.
Thank you very much. The people there in the back, you think that you not have any vote, but I will also come to you. So what you have voted?
Well, I think first of all, techniques is important, but it's not at all the most important layer. What about compliance and rules? I think that the professor of Constance, I forget the name, yes, said that there are a lot of possibilities to do a lot of things, also with the current regulations. So for me, it's not the most important. But as Professor Burkhardt said this morning, an integrated public service governance is very important. And there is a big difference between governance and management. And the first aspect and layer that must be developed is this.
Thank you very much. What you?
I vote for the semantic. I vote for the semantic problem. Yes, yes.
Thank you. And you, would you like vote?
I voted legal interoperability because I think the important one to have. Once you have a very good legal framework, all the other layers are going to follow it soon or less. So there will be interoperability.
Thank you very much. Someone to add to these questions who would like to? Yes, the lady here.
I voted for the organizational, but I do think that all of those 5 areas are very important in getting the organizational right, because one straighter cannot do without the other, in my opinion.
Strongly in line also with the gentleman in the front. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I'm looking at this both from a kind of academic point, but also from a practical point. I've been working the last 5 years with heritage organizations, emergency services, and in fact, it all turns around integrated public service governance, because that's where you get all people together. That's where you define the real need for a service, and once you get those people together and you really get to the point of what's necessary, then the organizational thing will follow if it's necessary. If you're talking about the police, it's maybe not really necessary to reorganize the police to have a better service. And the legal is not always a problem, it will follow, you can change it. Semantic is also depending on what you have decided in Pillar 5. So this is really from the most profound part of my heart, the core of the real deal.
Thank you very much. Emanuele, thank you very much.
No, I was just prompted by the responses, because obviously I would need to align 100% with Natalia for party line. All the dimensions are important, but perhaps I was thinking while I was listening to all of you, because I agree with different, for example, semantics, definitely the dimension where it's there's more perspective and more underinvestment at the moment. But if I think about the most disregarded, for me it's organizational. And I will tell you just a brief story. At one point I also had previous lives outside the interoperability bubble, and I was responsible in Italy for, let's say, the reuse of public data for statistical production in the country. And there's legislation there. Semantic interoperability, because the archives are more or less well classified. Technology was easy because all the formats were acceptable. And the stumbling block was that at the organizational level, despite the laws, the implementations and the nitty-gritty daily operational aspects were disregarded. So we know in Italy, for some of the colleagues who are here, that we have very beautiful laws and very little implementation acts that are blocking this. And so just a message, pay attention to the organizational or implementation interoperability aspects, even when the other dimensions are in place, because this could be the blocking factor, even when everything was looking splendid on paper.
Thank you very much. I'm curious, George, what you would vote?
I say, I mean, of course, because with Victoria we've been working on organizational, so that would be my favorite, but it's true that organizational, it's difficult to also separate them totally. I mean, I totally agree with you. There is, because organizational, you have also to have the governance structure to choose the semantic. I mean, what are the standards you will use? So there are interlinked, and this, I guess, this is why they are the most difficult ones, because they are not layers that are isolated. I mean, technical, I mean, we have internet, we have protocol, IP, we have standards, so it exists semantic as well. It's something that you can easily grasp. And I think the method for defining semantic interoperability, also there need to be agreement. The methods, they are known. There are many agreements. Now it's becoming more and more obvious. But to find, I mean, since we work, and Victoria can maybe say a word about that, it was really difficult to find, I would say, the recipe and the ways, the guidelines to implement organizational interoperability, because different factors, we have different governance structures, so we cannot say build an agency that will impose tools for everybody, because we know certain member states is not possible, and we have also different levels of administration that are sometimes autonomous, so it's very complicated, and I think, yeah, we need to have more work on it and to get more attention.
Thank you very much. From the first row, we go to the last row.
Hello, everybody. My name is Timur. I'm representing the Central Asian Interoperability Institute. So from my perspective, I think the organizational interoperability is the most important and most difficult for during the implementation, because the rising awareness among the people, and it's really difficult to implement. So many decision makers are just not aware about what is happening. There are a lot of flags and gaps in the organizational one. So if you are increasing the awareness among the people who are working on it and who are deciding what kind of activities we will do the next stage, it will be real good. But organizational, it's really difficult. Another aspect that influences organizational one, it is the trust between the institutions, because for the better solutions, we have to trust each other, and unfortunately, there is no trust. I mean, at the moment, there is a big gap between even the countries, internal institutions among the national level. So the trust is also most important thing in the organizational one. So for me, from my perspective, organizational one is the most important part on the European Interoperability Framework levels. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the fourth question. How important would you rate the cross-border component for successful digital transformation of the public sector? That's up to you. We see a majority is scoring very high to high together, so more than 70%, but low also, 15% and neutral. I think, Emanuele, you already strengthened several times this morning this issue of cross-border.
Well, I'm with the majority, obviously, here because of what I said, but perhaps I can take this opportunity to emphasize another dimension of cross-border, and these are the internal borders in very decentralized administrations. This can be a blocking factor, lack of interoperability cross-border. Scandinavian countries, which have the highest scores in terms of digital maturity index, still face quite a bit of a challenge when it comes to interoperability of social services, because of the very heavy role that subnational governments have in the system, for example in healthcare, and also because of the governance, where the subnational governments are not hierarchically below the central government, but they're like peers in the organization. So let's say there may be certain circumstances where the internal borders may be even more important than the cross-border dimension at the international level. And I guess that most of the people who answer, but you will tell me, had Europe in mind, because when it comes to global interoperability, I don't know whether cross-border is as high important, let's say, for public services at the moment, I would say, but maybe this is not the case in your opinion, than it is definitely in Europe. But
Robert, thank you very much, Emanuele. I'm sorry that I interrupted you. Emanuele, Robert. Yes, Robert.
Okay. No, I mean, I think if we take the question as it is right here, so how important is cross-border component for the successful digital transformation of public sector? For me, that sounds very national. Yeah, and if I think about national implementation of e-government, then I have to say only about 5% of my population lives abroad within Europe. So the cross-border component for the successful transformation is probably not that important if I just think about my citizens. But if I think about companies and businesses, and if I think about the single market, then I would say the single market cannot happen without the cross-border element, naturally. And that's what we will see more and more as we are all becoming more and more mobile, live in other countries, we're moving as students from one country to another, move maybe 4 times. I think it's essential. But without, if we don't need Europe, then we don't need cross-border. Yeah? But I think it's actually evident that we need both.
Thank you. Gianluca or Steven? Gianluca.
Well, I agree with both Robert and Emanuele, of course, and actually I realized I had a similar experience like Robert, as also in Italy we have more than one first names, and I mean, moving from Milan to Rome and then going from high school to university, I was inexistent. So I mean, you risk to be not married, that depends. I was, so I still today, I have documents with different names. And in Spain, where you have always 2 surnames, and sometimes it's compulsory with the asterisk, so you have to invent a second surname, even if it's not true. So, but having said that, I think clearly the multi-level governance of different countries is where the interoperability need to be implemented. But also, I would put emphasis on the multi-sector, because the problem we have also today is the data sharing between public and private sector, so the free flow of data. So I think this is also another additional complexity that we can not ignore and take into consideration when it comes to really make this happen. Although it's true that, as Robert said, we were checking the data, there is a small a minority of citizens that have the privilege, as we, to travel and live in different countries and study, but this is growing. If I look at Italy, now there's a big immigration outside of the country, so this will be more the norm, and I would be definitely, I mean, in favor of increasing this much more.
Thank you very much. Steven.
Cross-border, nice if you can have it, but if not, well, then not, I would say. Of course, we'd like to move forward all together, but you don't want the laggards to frustrate the innovators. So I would not exclude the possibility that we, in terms of digital Europe, will move into a 2-track Europe, where a small group of countries will move forward and will move forward very fast, whereas other countries will remain behind. So, and we do not want the overall progress to be halted by a number of laggards who do not want to join immediately. So I think that's a major risk. So yes, ideally cross-border, but let's not have the cross-border component stop some who want to move forward faster.
Thank you very much. Somewhere in this room voted for not important. Who is this one? I saw no one's leaving this room, so at least one person. Okay, you. Now, to be honest, I'm just interested why you think that it is not important for you. And I respect your view.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, actually, I have a similar view as just presented. I think that, as it's stated, a successful digital transformation doesn't say it's on a European level. So when you're just considering it as a national task, their cross-border components are, I think, more a hurdle or something on top that make it more difficult. But of course, I also agree on all the other opinions that if you need to have some interoperability, if we need to have some interaction, then of course it is important.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So who voted for low? Is there also someone low voting? Okay, but also some nuance. Someone there up? No? Then here. Okay,
well, I'll be brief then. When I saw the question, I also thought, okay, well, depends who you ask, right? Everyone here in the room will probably say it is very important, but the average citizen, I mean, they don't move, not as much yet, but they don't do it that much. So for them, it's not that important. But it's like, what is the aim? And thinking of the presentation of the professor also, who benefits from the cross-border, right? So in the case now in Italy, a lot of people are migrating to other countries. Maybe in that case, they don't want that. So they might want to block that. as much as possible, keep it low, so it is more difficult to go outside of the country. And others, they might be much more open, because the easier it is to get talent that moves across Europe, the better it is to have this cross-border component. So it really is still a matter of for who is it important and for what purpose is the cross-border. For me personally, I would say very high, but for the average person, it's low.
Thank you very much, Colin. I go to the lady on the top.
Well, I would like to highlight that a cross-border component would be, in fact, more components in an IT world. And if you design them properly, then the interoperability that you would require at local, at any level of administration, would allow you to also extend them to cross-border. So interoperability required at local level would have those components that you could reuse at a higher level. And I would like also to emphasize that it's not only within Europe. Our world now is global, and that interoperability must exist already for any government, is it Europe or not, to the outside world, to the rest of the regions of the world. So it's very important that we do not consider that we could live in an isolated national world.
Thank you very much. If there is nothing to add, then I would like to go to the next question, question number 5. The main bottleneck for digital transformation is technological, political, legal, financial, human resources, cultural. Victoria, what have you voted?
I was in between political and cultural, but I decided to put my vote to political, because sometimes, no matter how we change in cultural, then in the final end, because we speak about a bottleneck, it's the political aspect that really sometimes acts as an enabler or as a barrier.
Thank you very much. Dear members of the panel, someone to respond, or what you would respond to this result?
I'm somewhere in between political and cultural, and also want to give an anecdote about my name when moving to another country. So I moved from Belgium to the Netherlands, and it took me about 2 years to get my surname in the right format in Dutch databases. I'm still getting letters with my surname spelled in the wrong way. And each time you try to convince someone in government or in a university administration to change my name to the proper spelling, the answer was, yeah, but you're just plain wrong. The thing you're proposing is not possible that you spell a name in such a way. So there was very profound cultural misunderstanding about certain things, and I think we also have to deal with that when working across borders in terms of digital transformation. Countries have different views of what the state is and what the state should do. Just the idea of a government selling alcohol in dedicated alcohol shops, or the private sector running fire services, that those ideas are just so foreign when you transport them to different countries, that it will be very difficult to find a good consensus about this. So the way to overcome this is, I think, to go back to how the early European integration worked, a very technocratic, functional collaboration behind the screens, very low politics. So I think to overcome some of those hurdles, we need to make sure this issue does not become political. Let's at least pretend it's a very functional, technocratic issue. Once you start talking about the bigger questions, then probably the process will stall.
Other members of the panel, please.
So I refuse to answer. I didn't play ball because I really couldn't pick just one. I know that this is an easy answer. But for me, the answer to the question is the ability to deliver, and I will tell you why. Because even if you have all these beautiful things, and we know that in some circumstances we had the right political stewardship, the money available, in a way also a group of people at least that were spearheading the transformation and so on and so forth, still, I mean, if you don't get the results down on the ground, you are not successful. So my definition of success is very much about changing things on the ground. And probably you would require a bit of orchestration of all these dimensions, plus the capacity to deliver, however, which is not necessarily there. The capacity to deliver is a mix of your skills, your capabilities, but also your organizational capacity, particularly when, let's say, the change management is so complex, like in a digital transformation. And that, I think, is where we are all struggling. Where with the, let's say, we have the ambition clear. In some cases, we secure the funding, we secure the resources, the human capacities, but still the ability to put all these things to the good work and deliver exactly what was intended is not there. And typically these things are delayed, projects are overspending, or they get the frustration level that we were reminded this morning because they are not exactly, let's say, providing what was expected by the users.
Thank you very much.
So for me, I think if we would rename cultural into digital mindset, then it would be much more agreeable, or even more than what we have up there. I mean, I can also just speak out of we all know this one example in our family, the one family member that just doesn't want to deal with this technological crap. Until that point that there is this one thing that interests them so much that they are willing to go forward with it. And once they have done that, then everything else follows. Think about your grandparents that finally can see the pictures of their grandkids. Yeah, and once they're able to do that, they look at the iPad and they see it's coming in and they start to do emails, they start to do their taxes online and things like that. We all know about those transformation projects. So it's about interest and it's about the willingness and about seeing how does it work. So actually working on that digital mindset about taking the fear of people from it, then everything else will follow. I mean, we can pour as much money as we want at digital transformation. If we don't get the users on board, it's all for a waste. Yeah. So yes, politicians are a big problem, but also they are just users. If we can win them over by having the ability to use something sexy, something cool, think about electronic voting in Estonia. It started out with only 2%. Now we're at every second voter doing it. But it was one key to use the digital ID card. But what really got them to do it was then to use it every day for digital banking. Yeah? So having this mix of things that convince people to use our digital services makes digital transformation work.
Thank you very much. Gianluca?
Well, once again, I think I'm an outlier because I would go rather for the legal part. I was saying rather the legal implementation, because despite there is a lot, actually, I would say a plethora of laws on how to exchange data and all the various, let's say, issues related to technology implementation, etc. I think, and yesterday I was in this event in Milan, it came out quite clear, at least in Italy, but I believe that this is also in other countries, that the problem is that despite there are rules, so sometimes they are confused, they are contradicting each other, and there is no real implementation, because if you want to transform digitally any organization, being the public or in the private, you need to innovate, and there is a kind of contradiction in terms sometimes between being legally compliant and innovative, and most of the time, especially in the public sector, everybody goes for being very compliant up to the point that you reduce innovation to zero or even negative. So I would say on the legal part, there is much to be done. And again, as we said at the beginning, technology and emerging technology can help us, because AI systems are more intelligent than humans to check if there are duplication of laws, for instance.
Thank you very much. What you voted?
In fact, I voted for human resources because that is what we experience. we see the will of the politician in my region to invest in digital transformation. So to do it and also to give money for it. I'm a little bit surprised about the cultural point there, so that I did not expect, and that is also not my experience, that is a bottleneck. So I see their difference in progressing in different cultures, but I would not say it's a bottleneck.
Thank you very much. And you, what you voted?
I also voted for human resources.
Interesting. Who here voted for cultural? No one? Okay, yeah, but it's really other way around. But you, what you voted for?
I believe that if you have the people with you and the culture, they will fix the other parts. They will find the way. They will find the finances or the technology or what's needed.
So what you voted?
Cultural.
Okay, thank you. And you, what you voted?
I didn't vote. No, because I am thinking more from the perspective of the balance of the different factors to achieve the digital transformation. But it relates to culture, and I like the comment about the digital mindset. Yeah. Yes, because you also have to think about this people working versus artificial intelligence and how to have inclusiveness of people in the process, all people.
Thank you very much. We have still 4 to go. We have 20 minutes, so we go a little bit, speed it up a little bit. There's one comment there somewhere. Would you like to add something?
Yes, I very much like the answer of Robert Krimmer comparing digital transformation and what happens with your family and how you make people to do things. And I have been reading through different reports of digital transformation and digital service projects around Europe. It includes many success stories, but also many failures. And looking into the failures, what I have recognized is that one element has always been missing. That element is change management. And with change management, I do not mean it as words. I mean applying professionally existing change management methodology or framework. And if you look into the projects of the countries from which we come, and if you go through the projects, have you recognized that there would be as much of change management resources as there are project management resources? And when we have the structure of legal, organizational, and so on, we start from the top, politics, we start from the organizations, and we say that we have some policies and politics and how we want to implement. Then we go from up down. We have a stronger project organization always, and if something goes wrong, we add project resources. So in the end, we have a group of people who have lack of motivation, they don't have desire, they have to implement, and then we ask, why don't people use the services? Or why don't civil servants want to do this and that? So that's my answer. Change management is what we need.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the question number 6. In order to have a successful digital transformation, there is a strong need for clear rules, laws, and working structures, competition and market. 3, profound cooperation. This refers to the lecture or the presentation from Professor Bukat this morning. We see here clear rules, laws, and working structures refers to hierarchy. The market is competition and market. And 3, that refers to the network approach. And I'm very curious about your results. Dear colleague, Steven.
Well, I did not vote for the first one because you have to wait for clear rules and laws and working structures. We can start digital transformation by 2030. Didn't vote for the second one because then probably we'll get an oversupply of digital transformation in some sectors and a total undersupply in probably the more important sectors. So I went for profound cooperation. So we need to recognize that we need some legal frameworks, we need some market, but a lot of it depends on a lot of meeting together, tinkering, bricolage, kind of building some workarounds and gradually building this digital transformation.
Thank you. Interesting.
I also voted for the third item, but with a slightly different spin, or at least my interpretation of cooperation is partnerships. And partnerships with different stakeholders. I mentioned this morning the involvement of the private sector, not purely from a procurement point of view, but also as a partner in the transformation, including with activities or, let's say, initiatives like GovTech initiatives. And also I would mention involvement of the users in the ways that we have been describing as part of a process to redesign the services, and fundamentally involvement of the people who are behind the services, because if you're not involving your workforce, those who are behind the desk and in the analogic world are delivering the services, any transformation will stop at the point that the services have to be delivered. So let's say managing these various partnerships in the right way is the cooperation needed.
If the system would have allowed me, I would have voted for 1 and 3 and would have redefined it as governance. I think that's what is needed to have a successful digital transformation, so that we actually govern the process of this change, that we are actually able to include the necessary stakeholders, so that we actually have an interest exchange and make sure that we actually deliver on what we promise.
Thank you.
Well, in my case, since as I said, I had a small problem of documents when I was entering university, but I managed to succeed, and then eventually studied economics, but also a bit of law and then technology. I would take my economics hat, and I'm fully convinced that we need to create a market. There's no really market for let's say, digital transformation at the moment with the public sector. Despite the public sector in most countries is the larger, he's spending the most in IT, but he's just using technology vendors as a provider of service solutions. So then what Emanuele said is fundamental. We need to move from this paradigm into more public-private partnerships, and even changing the mechanism for investing in digital transformation. But maybe on this we can talk a bit later also, because I see there is room for making some recommendations coming out of this very exciting discussion.
Thank you very much. Ludovic, I'm curious about your opinion.
Yep, thanks, Joep. Basically, I voted for profound cooperation because, in my opinion, without profound cooperation, 1 and 2 could not really happen, basically, are not enough.
Thank you very much. Hans, I'm very curious also about your opinion.
I was also choosing as the most important one profound cooperation. I mean, and then it's bigger than just us and industry. It's what they always call the quadruple helix, which makes it even more complicated. But that's what we are faced with. If we want to combine new technology with old structures, we need new thinking, and we're not always going to find it inside government, so we have to look outside government as well.
Thank you very much. Because the time is ticking, let's go to the next question. Question number 7. The necessity for interoperable systems and data needs to be assessed against the public values that public administrations aim or stand for. I think you have to read it twice, 3 times maybe, to digest what is written. It's an interesting question. I'm curious what the gentlemen are saying there, but only 6 people so far have voted. So let's wait for what they have voted. So it seems to be a question that we have to digest what we really are saying. We see disagreement is increasing. Disagreement increase. Although I'm aware that some people left, so we cannot get a target of 60 people. So let's go for 50 people then. So we have 30 to go still.
Robert, what do you think? You don't know.
I'm curious. I thought you know everything. No, not always. That was not one of the questions I definitely wanted to answer. Yeah. So I'm sorry. No. I mean, I think when, of course, it needs to be done that when we're talking about interoperable systems and the data that we're doing, if that actually is something that we're striving for in our public administration. But is that, can it not also be done for other reasons? Because we need to do that. So, I mean, it's really a trick question. So I'm not sure.
I'll give you my reading of the question and why I chose to agree in the end. Let's say the way I interpret the question is that in the end, what we do in public administration should be trying to create public value.
Exactly.
So that's more than output and outcomes. It's something a bit broader, difficult to define, difficult to operationalize in a cost-benefit analysis, but that should be in our production function, so generating public value. And that creates some trade-offs, because let's say, broadly speaking, and I'm now borrowing, let's say, a model from someone else, you have on the one hand your various inputs, technologies, resources, people, capabilities of various types, and on the other hand the political capital, which is the authority that you have as a public manager to produce value. And you may be going front end in terms of delivering an outcome, for example, more security by using a lot of the inputs, and by doing that you are disempowering yourself because you are consuming too much of your political capital, because the people at one point are afraid that you are creating a police state. So having these three things in balance and realizing the good, let's say, public value without overconsumption of your authority and at the same time using your inputs effectively, it's what a modern public manager should have in mind. But not easy to operationalize, I would say, and even worse to monetize or put in a cost-benefit analysis.
Thank you. Steven?
Countries and national administrative systems have different priorities, and we should work with those priorities. Do we want a big state or a small state? Do we actually want to share data across borders, or do we certainly want to avoid this because we may have had bad examples in the past? Is our prime value to avoid mistakes in administrative service delivery, or is it to maximize efficiency? And you can't achieve all at the same time, and then civil servants from different countries may have extremely differing views on this.
Interesting response.
So, I mean, I could talk for hours on public value because I've been writing a bit on that. But I mean, to support Robert, let's say, confusion, I would say that there is I mean, the link of causality between data interoperability and public value is too far. On the other side, and I mean, following on what Stefan said earlier, that public administration will stay forever, because, of course, if they would have to compete in the private sector, they would have already bankrupt in most cases, and this cannot happen. It's because there is a function that the state has to assume historically for the time being. So that means that despite what Professor Booker said this morning, of course, performance is important and cost-benefit analyses are necessary, but there are other values that as a public sector we need to encourage. Inclusion, social cohesion, openness even, and there where data interoperability is important, because then can help us, for instance, fighting corruption, a very basic problem. But on the other side, we need to make sure that as a government, we can provide services to all. So that's also an important element that links to the concept of public value.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive response. I would like to give the word now to Maxime. You do a PhD about this topic, so you should be familiar, and next year you hope to finalize your...
Well, thank you. So indeed, my research is focused on the public values that public administrations strive for in the digitalization policies. But I liked also the comment that was made by Gianluca. The public values are very far from your interoperable systems and data, and so maybe they can be an element of it, but it should not be the case that only the public values are the only aim, actually. So you have your public values and your interoperable systems and data can be helpful for it, but it should not be that if your public values are not in line with your interoperable systems and data that you shouldn't go for it. So that's my response.
Thank you very much for your answer. Let's go to the next question, question number 8. 2 questions to go. I don't see anyone sleeping, so that is good. So everybody's awake still? Yes. So let's go for question number 8. What are the initiatives that have to be taken by governments at national, local level, EU level to support and transform digital transformation? So here you see, to your surprise, this is an open question. So now you really have to work and to put all in your fingers. That's quite difficult, but let's go for it. Success. Winterkool, ah.
Very good. I agree.
The moment you have open questions, this is what is happening. Eh?
Yeah, because otherwise it's bandwagon. You follow the or joking. That's why we don't publish the reports.
So, Gianluca, what is your response when you see all this beautiful cloud of words?
I'm very happy, and that standardization is so high, as we have been discussing. I see my colleague Andrea laughing about standardization in the last 3-4 weeks. And there will be a lot of discussion now with the new commission on this, not only for AI, but more in general. In that sense, I mean, a personal view, quite bold, is that maybe if I, for instance, if I was representing a member state, I would advocate for having less sovereignty from the member states and giving a bigger role to institutional organizations to provide the support to make sure that we can harmonize our systems. Because this is one of the issues that as the EU has no, let's say, competence in this, then definitely it is going very slow. And maybe something will happen with the new commission, who knows?
Thank you. Robert?
Okay, does it work? Yeah, okay. No, I mean, I think winter schools was a very good one, and then exchange for, I mean, I'm a bit sad it got lost. No, but I mean, I think it's coming back. Okay, no, let's see. No, but I think the digital mindset for me means that we all understand what does it mean for linking instead of copying data. Yeah. And thinking digital means that we are actually having systems that work with each other and that collaborate, and actually supporting digital thinking, digital mindsets automatically means interoperable systems. So I think that's what needs to be supported on the lowest level possible, meaning starting in kindergarten, schools, universities, elderly homes, because I think those are the people that have time. The working people, I mean, those are the ones that actually need to use it, but it's usually too late to reach them. Sometimes it is, but I mean, that's the hardest one to reach. But we need to work at the beginning and at the end, and then we'll manage those in the middle. And that's what should be supported, and it will automatically become interoperable.
Excellent. Emanuele?
I didn't vote for it, but I like passion a lot.
Yeah.
First, because I'm coming from a passion-centered country and culture, but not least importantly, because I believe, as I said at the beginning, that this whole thing about digital transformation should not be, let's say, a cold, separate dimension, and it should be winning the hearts and minds, and particularly the hearts of people, meaning that we need to speak a political language, and we need to have a narrative about the digital transformation that is highly political in the good sense of the word, if you want. So able to mobilize energies, to mobilize consensus, and to help drive the efforts. In that sense, it's a highly political priority, and if it is a highly political priority, it will also get the traction to be implemented.
Thank you. Steven?
The most important thing is, of course, to fund a new round for our Erasmus Mundus program on e-governance and public sector innovation to build skills. And secondly, it's about building digital ecosystems, not just focusing on digital government, but investing in local companies, indeed, kindergartens, elderly homes, etc., to bring especially those laggards to a certain base level from which they can work. So there's still too many people who don't use any of those digital systems, and if we can't get them along, then it will be very difficult to make the next step.
Thank you very much. Nadia, I'm curious about you.
For me, it's several words. Actually, it's inclusion of everybody who should be involved in order to get a common understanding what the services are about, so they are comprehensive from the side of the information providers and users as well, which includes semantic modeling, which is something that goes way beyond standardization and so as part of interoperability.
Thank you very much. Marie-Claudia.
Yeah, I think every word is correct, and I wrote passion, enthusiasm. Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. And what have you voted, or what not voted, what you have wrote down?
So I have written down that there needs to be training and also information to all the stakeholders. I think that is crucial to remove the challenges in the culture.
Thank you very much, and I'm also very curious about what you are saying. Have wrote down?
I voted citizens' engagement and passion.
Wow, we are all passionate people. Excellent. Let's go to question number 9, the last one. And don't worry, we run a little bit out of time, but don't worry, our closing session will be not so long. So like question number 9, the last question, a little bit boring question to be honest, because it's about legal issues. Which legal form should the European interoperability framework take? It's quite a comprehensive one, so you have to think about it and digest. I think everyone is waiting for other people. Which legal form should the European interoperability framework take? EU regulation? Thank you. Not you, student, not fun. Prison? Sausage. Prison. Directive. It's too late. No, we are almost finished. Yeah, it seems so. Let's, gentlemen, what's your comment about this?
Can I ask a question? What is Joep?
Please continue, please. I think it's Friday afternoon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I thought it was some acronym that I was not aware of.
So most of my work is on public sector reform, and the main thing you always hear when working with European Union is, well, Europe does not have any formal competence to interfere in national public administration. And so we always used detours, so building administrative capacity in order to help countries to implement EU directives, or in order to help countries to spend structural funding, etc. So there was a handy detour to channel billions and billions of euros into administrative reform at the national level. You can also rely on, for instance, the right to good administration in the Charter of Fundamental Rights. So there are a couple of detours you can use to make a claim, well, Europe, the European Union has a legal competence to do something about this. And that has always worked thus far without a proper legal framework. So I guess this will probably also work without a proper legal framework, as long as the collaboration remains a very functional collaboration, as long as the funding actually comes from the European level.
Thank you very much. Robert or Gianluca, something to add?
No, I mean, I think it's very similar to what Steven has said, so I can second that. I think it will naturally come. I think having an actual legislation probably is quite big, quite a big step. Let's see if it's really needed. I think the implementing step is, I think, the much more important. If it's being implemented, it naturally will follow, and EU money can help with that.
Yeah, I mean, since already this morning, Miguel, I mean, in a Catholic university was somehow being blasphemed, so I don't want to be blasphemous, so I would have to follow the traditional institutional view that as we were so successful with the Inspire directive, for instance, we should follow the same approach. Maybe make a directive and making sure the member states will implement these step by step. But since my head of unit is in India at the moment, maybe he's not listening to me. Maybe we could be a bit more ambitious and try to push for, something more, let's say, more quick and not taking 10 years to make sure the member states realize then they have to respect the directive. And so this will probably bring to the market in, because if there is a demand, then the offer can be satisfied.
Thank you very much. And there was a last question, a follow-up question for the panel only. How to ensure it's implemented at all levels in Europe? I think so. You are excellent, audience. You are excellent. Thank you very much. So with this, I would like to finish this session. I would like to give a big applause to Gianluca, Misuraca, Robert Krimmer, Emanuele, and Steven. Thank you very much, but I also want to thank you. You were an excellent audience, you are very active, and thank you for all your responses. Enormously appreciated. So with this, I would like to give the... Would you like to add something?
I just wanted to thank you as a chair, because you moderated very, very well.
Thank you very much. So now we come to the closing session, and I give the floor first to you, George. Yes. And so you can leave. You are allowed.
Okay, so we're arriving at the end of this school. I'm happy to see there are still, I was wondering if we still have a lot of people, but I guess we are still around 60 people. And it was very, for me it has been a pleasure, it has been a challenge. We did not expect to take such a dimension, but we managed to do it, and now it's time for closing. So the first thing is that, come here, Joep, so it's to, because you're the next interoperability framework, so you're the first response. So first it was a surprise, because usually we need to promote before the event, to do some promotion to get more participants, and here we say we have to stop. So we stop promotion because anyway we cannot accept anybody else. So we decided to stop tweeting about it, so we will do a campaign after. So we had more than 150 participants. For us it was a test run, successful one, so we say okay, we created the Interoperability Academy by discussion and with, having a trainee with and discussing with Joep. And we decided, okay, let's do something with the Pioneer, etc. And we ended up doing this school, and we say, okay, let's try. If it works, if it has a success, it's a big success. And maybe if you want to take over.
What I think, thank you very much, George. So what I really enjoyed was a nice mix of civil servants, of public sector, and academia, and private sector, and students, and that we have a good conversations. And I think it was from both ways, from several ways, it was very interesting. What I like very much, dear students, thank you very much for your contribution. It was very much appreciated. Then what I also like that various relevant interoperability topics were covered. Not only one topic, but really I don't want to continue because I can talk for hours about it, but I won't do that. It's Friday afternoon, but a lot of different topics were mentioned. And I really think, and that gives a dimension, that's quite a complex issue with different levels, with different dimensions, and also relevant to different disciplines, but that we all discussed the last days. Mix of active workshops and plenary lectures. So in the morning we were all sitting here together. In the afternoon we had the opportunity to meet and to have to work together. I think that was, I really enjoyed it, and also I think, I hope that most of you also enjoyed it. And what I would like to say from my side, it was very pleasant collaborating. Really from my heart, I would like to say, collaborate between your unit, and our group, KU Leuven Public Governance Institute.
So, and it was, we were impressed also by, on the content itself. So there was a lot of ongoing activities, either at EU level. We managed also to present just a bit of what the various DG are doing, and also member states. So there is a lot of activities going on. We see as well there are different levels, but it's good to have these forums also that you can learn from each other, be inspired by others. There is also a strong support, so the thing that I'm happy is that I didn't see anybody to have issues to pronounce interoperability now after the third day, so it's something that you can say, I suppose. I don't know if somebody dreamed about interoperability during, or no?
I will dream.
You will dream, yeah. And there are also this thing that I think sometimes I find sometimes the speech are a bit too pessimistic, because from when we see there is a clear uptake. There are really progress, and we see also with the SDG, which has, if you see SDG, we're discussing that it was a regulation, so it's very strong, it's applicable, but it was accepted by member states. So it's something very strong in a way that is not normally in the competences of the EU, but it was a regulation that was signed. So for me, it's a sign that things are changing, and it was very nice. Public innovation. It's a thing, so it's everywhere, and it's not something you do aside. Even we have an action dedicated to that. I think now it's covering everything. There is also a lot of redesigning public service development. There is a need as well from Emanuele to have an EU interoperability mechanism, and we see that it's starting now. Various member states start to have sort of platform to help interoperability in their own country, and I think there is a need that was even expressed by member states. We need this at EU level, and as well from Professor.
And then from Geert Boekhart, that was very obvious with his full of passion. That's the word of this afternoon. Whereby the obvious is not the obvious. I forgot there a question mark, and hopefully this is just the beginning, and that hopefully that will continue, because we need to learn from each other. We need to learn from different practitioners, from different professionals. Academia, we have to learn from people from the practice. Practitioners could learn from academics. Students can learn from professionals and academics, but also professionals can learn from students. So I like that very much, and it was a joy to do this. And also I hope that we have contributed to this network and to these conversations. So hopefully this is the start of a long, long series in the future.
So now the acknowledgments. So of course it was a team effort. So there is a lot of people you have seen on stage. So we start on the side of our unit. So first of all, I would thank, and I will ask you to come, Victoria. So we are the Victoria, who is a big part. She was thinking, reminding me of things to do. So she was really my guardian angel for this job. So really thank you, Victoria, and part of this success. Natalia, of course, who has been supporting me, and she will come later. After I will, the colleagues, so we have colleagues who help for the communication, for the graphic design, for participating, helping us with the workshops, supporting us, also our contractors. So I will ask you as well to come, those who are here, to come on the stage. If you could. Go fast. As well, I would especially thank he's not here because we could say he's at the origin, because it's Adrian Dusha, who was at that time deputy head of unit, who had the idea to have a trainee from KU Leuven, because he studied in Leuven and he established the contact. So I would say he's really the seed of this event. So we have to acknowledge, although he's not here. Also my colleagues, Dietmar, if you can come, because they contribute a bit at the last moment. I know they came, it was a very long trip to come here, but, and Andrea and Gianluca, and also we have other contributors. So if you can come and they help us. Thanks. Can I set you up, or you want to? And also now it's time to Leuven, but we have to thank Lotte. She has been she's the essential element of this. She was managing almost everything. She was saying no to everything. She was saying, yes, we can do. We're asking, can we do that? Yeah, no problem. And Lotte, thanks a lot. And Maxime as well, he has been our trainee. So, Maxime, thanks a lot for the work you did at EC, the work you did now, because you didn't stop. I know it was very tiring for you, so thank you very much, and we hope the most successful for your PhD, and let us know where you will finish it.
And Stijn, please downstairs. Thank you very much for all your support. Enormously amazing. Working always with the microphone. Inge Vermeulen, I think she's walking around. Anneke Heilen, Paula, Annie Hondeken, my director. Thanks for her support that it all happened. Geert Boekaert, Steven. You are hiding, very good. Thank you very much, Steven, for all your contributions, and Vasilios Peristreos.
And so now it's not the end. We will continue. It's not the end of the story. So we will send evaluation forms. So for you to tell us what you think about, what we could improve, because since we are thinking to do something else, we would like to know where we could. We're already processing some lesson learned, some incident. Everything was not perfect, but that's life.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and the PowerPoint videos and photo, they will be available on JoinUp. So, and we expect to continue also either through the platform or through other means, the cross collaboration between academia and professional. And as well, we want to continue to learn from the young generation. So do not hesitate to drop us a message to communicate with us. So because it was really refreshing for us to be here. And we will write also a summary report. We will continue organizing webinars and courses in JoinUp. So from now on, there will be courses. So when if we use JoinUp, we will know when there is a course on a specific topic. So if you want to go deeper, we will try to strengthen the network, and your future contribution will be enormously appreciated and essential. So thanks to you all.
So thank you to your contribution, for your support, but also to your support. Thank you very much that we happened and that we accomplished the first winter school 2019. Thank you very much, and I wish you all have a smooth journey back home, leaving this town Leuven, wherever on the world. Take care of yourself, and see you next time, maybe in Leuven. Thank you very much. Someone else.
Ah, yeah. Can you? Yeah, we can go on the middle of the stage. Come here, hold, please.
Age of the self.
Yeah. Huh?
It's the age of the self.
Yeah, but we do it traditional way.
Yeah, I'm in Holland.
Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Can you take the...
Good.
A good picture.
Interoperability.
Interoperability. Yes, interoperability.
Interoperability.
It's going to be perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leave the European flag, so
yes,
just
yes.
behind you. So.
I hope so.
I was raised.
Oh, the camera. You didn't criticize Bible and...
Small gift for the speaker, but I'm asking really a test run.
So have a good driving back now. Yeah, 2 hours. Take care. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Just stop at the catalog. Yeah, but this is the thing that...
See you next time, and well, I guess there will be a closing conference for perhaps. So, well, I guess the next event or another ISA thing, perhaps, or conference. Vita. En terecht.
There's a Zoom meeting right now, and I'm already some 3, so I will join in a bit. Oh, actually, not really often.
I mean, we are neighbors, because I'm between...
Yeah.
So I think it might be over. Let's keep it that, so we would like to...